Nixon-Gleason alien encounter. I mean, we hear about it again and again and again. Obviously, I don't know, there must be something to this story because it's very difficult to just start a rumor and just, and have it continue to persist for decades and decades and decades. Just give me your overall sense of what people think of this story when they hear about it. Are they dismissive about it, or are they do they buy into it?
Right. Some people just seem to blindly accept it, and the story has unfortunately been marred with embellishments by some UFO researchers who claim Jackie told them everything. But the truth is, Jackie never commented on this story. He had every opportunity to come forward and say, this is a lot of nonsense. Don't listen to this. But he refused to deny it. He refused to comment. A few people have said that in private, Jackie would grudgingly admit, Nixon showed me the proof. So the story started in '74 in a passing comment by his then wife. They were living apart and possibly headed for divorce, when she mentioned to a magazine article writer, possibly the National Enquirer, that Jackie told me once that President Nixon went to an air base and took my husband with him and showed him these alien creatures. And when Jackie read this in the publication, she said he exploded with rage and yelled at her and said, you're never to speak of this. And that was the end of their marriage. They did divorce right after that. And so in 1983, I think she needed some money. So she started to write a book about Jackie. And she decided to write a one-page article for the National Enquirer and tell more details of this incredible story. She said Jackie came home late one night while he was hosting his golf tournament and was haggard looking, just pale and really shook up. So he was emotionally shattered that night. And she said this went on for days and days, that he would rail against the government for holding this secret and making people feel like idiots for having reported UFOs when they know the truth. They've got the bodies. And then he would swing, she said, in mood swings to giddiness and excitement that I alone of all Americans got shown by the US president the real facts. And it was incredible, he said. And Beverly sat there thinking, is he just making something up? But he seems really shaken. And he began to smoke and drink more than he normally did, because Jackie is notorious for smoking and drinking. Mm-hmm. And apparently he had some trouble with sleeplessness. And he didn't work in the movies for years to come. He did a little TV work in '73, not a lot. So in 2003, to back up a little, in 1983, when this hit the Enquirer, Jackie blew up again. Called her up, yelled at her, told her to keep her mouth shut. And I think they reached a financial settlement. No book was ever forthcoming. And Jackie died 4 years later without ever commenting on this story. And apparently a number of people approached him. Could you please confirm or deny this story? And he would not. So in 2003, Beverly Gleason gave another interview and stuck to her story, refused to deny it or retract it in any way, and said that Jackie was very shaken up and that Nixon personally showed him at Homestead Air Force Base south of Miami, near where Jackie lived, the real hard proof, 4 dead small alien bodies laid out on examining tables that Jackie got a good close look at, probably was not allowed to touch. He did not report any injuries to them, but he said they looked like they'd been embalmed, which is an interesting description. I guess they looked like they just died or something and were well preserved. He said they had big pointy ears and they were only like 2.5 feet tall. And they had big creepy looking eyes. And if you've ever heard the old Hopkinsville, Kentucky UFO story of 1955, that's an exact description of that race of creatures that supposedly harassed a farm family out in the countryside.
Yeah, they sounded like goblins.
Yeah, that's right. And this sounds like exactly what Jackie said he saw. So Beverly, I could not track her down. I contacted another UFO researcher and asked, could you track her down? And he said, I can't find her either. She's close to 90. She's never given any interviews. She won't write a book. Apparently, she's clammed up because I think she's told, honestly, everything she knows about this story. So we have to examine this carefully. And when did it happen? How could it have taken place? Could Nixon really have shown Jackie, his golfing buddy, these creatures, and why? What was his motive, his incentive? And I think I figured it out while doing my research.
Okay, so Homestead Air Force Base, south of Miami. I mean, normally we associate these, having aliens on ice, if you will, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or maybe Area 51. I've never heard Homestead Air Force Base ever come up in conversations with UFO researchers about, oh, they may have bodies there and so forth, or a crash retrieval, they've taken debris there, they're back engineering. What are your thoughts on that?
I quite agree. Yeah, I agree with you. However, Nixon made 55 trips during his presidency to Key Biscayne, his winter beachfront home, just off Miami. And it was a short helicopter ride. He took Air Force One to Homestead Air Force Base all the time, got on a chopper at their chopper pad and flew to a chopper pad outside his Key Biscayne home. So he was there a lot, back and forth, in and out of Homestead. But I agree with you that we don't have any other kinds of tales of Homestead secret lab or something like that. It makes you think that maybe Nixon imported these bodies for his good friend, Jackie. They golfed together. They were fellow conservatives. Jackie had never gotten into politics before publicly, but in '68 he endorsed Nixon and they went golfing together. And he was part of a big pre-election TV special to endorse his friend. So they were close. And just a week or two before the moon landing in '69, Nixon and Jackie went golfing in the Key Biscayne area. So it's you've seen a lot of photographs of the two of them together golfing. They really were Republican-type golfing buddies in country clubs in the Miami area in the 1960s and 70s.
I think Gleason hosted didn't he host the Desert Classic, the Jackie Gleason Desert Classic?
The Jackie Gleason Open, Inverary Open, was Jackie Gleason's golf course home. It was right outside his window in the Miami suburb of Lauderhill, the Inverary golf course. Just about all of that is now closed, by the way. Jackie had a custom-built house built there, and he left New York City in '64 and moved to Miami, and he never went back to New York, leaving behind this custom-built UFO house, as they call it, this round spaceship-looking home he had built in Peekskill, New York, right outside of New York City. He had that sold to CBS executives, and they rented out to various people, including David Bowie in the late 1970s. Bowie was a huge UFO fan, and I go into a little of that, but it's diverging from our main story here.
Well, when did Gleason become, and how did he become so fascinated with ufology?
I don't know exactly when that started, but on February 19th, 1954, President Eisenhower made this trip to Edwards Air Force Base to meet with some friendly aliens. That's quite a story, and the rumor went out at the time, and Jackie heard it. And that's when he started having a custom designed home in the shape of a big spaceship on the edge of a bluff in Peekskill. And when you were inside it and looking out these huge bay windows, it made you look like you were in a flying saucer. Jackie had it custom built in an Air Force or an airplane hangar. And that's exactly where Eisenhower was said to have met in February of '54 with these aliens that landed on the edge of a runway at Edwards Air Force Base. So I'm beginning to think this could have been a big start to Jackie's obsession. As you were mentioning before the show, Jackie had a library, personal library of 1,700 paranormal books, heavy on UFOs, and it's still available for the public to view at the University of Miami in a special reading room. I don't think there was anyone in this country more obsessed with flying saucers, the paranormal, are we being visited by other creatures, than Jackie Gleason. He was so enthusiastic about it. Later in '55, he had himself, as Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners, wear this special spaceman suit, and he announces proudly, "I am the man from space," so he could go to a costume party. So that gives you more clues that Jackie was just nuts about the subject, and it was kind of risky, at that point. not all of Americans were mainstream talking about UFOs, flying saucers. You could be labeled a crackpot, and Jackie's career kind of kept him from maybe coming out too openly. He would call a radio station, Long John Nebel show, around midnight to like 2 a.m. in New York City and talk about UFOs on the air. But it wasn't widely known he was obsessed with this subject.
Oh, that's remarkable. I wonder if those they must exist somewhere.
You can find them on YouTube. The audio quality is terrible, but you can hear Jackie's voice talking about the latest UFO stories. And to his credit, he was skeptical of some of them, including George Adamski and this nonsense about taking a flight to Venus with Venus people. And Jackie wanted only the hard facts. And on that show, he said, I'll give $50,000 to anyone who can show me the hard proof of extraterrestrials visiting here. And over the years, that went up to $500,000. And by the early 70s, $1 million, he would say, to anyone that can show me the hard proof. Jackie made up to $14 million a year. So, $1 million here or there didn't mean that much to him. He was a free spender. So by early 73, Richard Nixon had gotten his tail caught in the crack. The Watergate scandal had exposed that he had some henchmen that broke into the Democratic Party headquarters, and they got caught. Nixon may or may not have known about that plot, but he wanted those plumbers, as they were called, the advisors who undertook this act, quiet, and he wanted their legal fees paid. And he is caught on White House tapes. He did bug himself in the Oval Office. And he's just furious in January of 73. Where are we going to find the hush money for these burglars? And in a few weeks afterwards, in March of 73, he's all calm and he says, I know where we can get that money. It's not a problem. So Jackie had $1 million. Nixon needed at least $1 million or more. So you can see the marriage here. Nixon had a lawyer named Herb Kalmbach that Jackie had once employed to do a sale of the Honeymooners episodes. So they even had a mutual lawyer friend who later went to jail for taking big bags full of money and giving it out as hush fund to various sources obstructing justice.
He literally was the bag man for Richard.
Yeah, in that case, yeah. So we don't have it on paper that Jackie gave the money to Kalmbach, who gave it to Nixon, who ordered it distributed. But we can put 2 and 2 together and logically come up with 4. Nixon needed the money. He knew Gleason was obsessed with this subject and was willing to part with $1 million. So I think they arranged this trip to Homestead.
And Nixon said, what, name your price? And Gleason said, I want to see alien bodies.
That's probably in a nutshell. Nixon probably asked, is this offer of $1 million still good? And Jackie said, are you serious? I'm sure it was something like that. And they negotiated this. There's a canard, a fabrication by a UFO researcher that Nixon showed up at Jackie's door, eluded all his Secret Service guards, 2 different checkpoints outside his Key Biscayne home, and drove like 45 miles from Key Biscayne in the dark at night to Jackie's home. That's not what happened. However, remember, Jackie was holding a golf tournament that very day, February 19th, 1973, the exact 19th anniversary of the Eisenhower encounter, with a chopper pad right behind his house. Jackie, all he had to do was take a walk or get in a golf cart and ride right out to the golf course chopper pad where Nixon had landed that day at noon on Monday the 19th. To speak to the press and pose for photos. And that's how you see pictures of the 2 of them together on that very day on a golf course. So Nixon, or at least his pilot, knew the coordinates, knew how to land, had landed there that afternoon. And I think he showed up there around 9 o'clock, maybe at night. They took Jackie to Homestead on a short flight, maybe took 25 minutes. And that's all there was.
So Nixon lands on Gleason's estate, the helicopter pad, and on February 19th, 1973, they take the 25-minute helicopter flight to Homestead Air Force Base. I don't know what then would have been required for the President of the United States to escort a citizen with, I'm guessing, zero security clearance
That's right.
into a
Zero
restricted area.
security clearances, zero checking out. But Nixon was king of the hill in 73. All past U.S. presidents were dead. J. Edgar Hoover was dead. Allen Dulles of the CIA and his staff were dead. It was amazing. Like, Nixon was the only man left standing king of the mountain. So
That's
he
right.
did whatever he wanted. He had just scored a landslide record victory in November of 72, and he was way up in the polls, bringing the Vietnam War to a close. So if Nixon said, I'm doing this, then, what are you going to do? Argue with the president of the United States? Jackie had no security clearances, but he was a good, trusted friend who had money. So according to Beverly Gleason, they landed at the Homestead Air Force Base, were met by armed security guards who escorted them to a lab across the base. I'm assuming they went there in a car, a limo, or maybe even a military vehicle of some kind. And there was a guard with a gun outside the laboratory, and that they went inside. And apparently Nixon didn't have too much to say. He didn't want to reveal too much other than, here it is, and on 4 examining tables were 4 different bodies, apparently rather identical. And that when Jackie got home, he was really shook up. Now, there's a report of all places. MeTV has a website, and they ran a story on the Nixon-Gleason encounter a few years ago. What do you think of this wild urban legend? Is it true? And one person wrote in by the name of Frank Noon and said, not only is it true, they went and toured on the base an Air Force hangar that you can see from the highway when you're driving by. And inside the hangar, Nixon showed Gleason a circular craft that they had recovered. And it was sort of alive, for lack of a better term. It was up in the air and being held down by cables. And that it was your typical silver round craft. And this was not something that Beverly Gleason had mentioned. And it could be a total fabrication. Anyone could say anything on the internet. But it's an interesting level of detail that would help cause Jackie to have been so shook up for days and days, maybe weeks. And to say, I know the government has the evidence. I saw it. Nixon showed it to me. And in later years, Nixon said, President Nixon or Gleason said, all I'm going to tell you is, he said to a few different associates, Nixon showed me the proof, and that's that. So that's as close as he ever came to admitting the story. And he died in 1987, apparently without any deathbed confession. But just almost everything that was alleged could have happened. It fits together. There was a time frame. I checked the digitized records of Richard Nixon. And on February 19th, it stops at 8:30 at night. Normally you get more. And it says a page has been removed from these files. If bingo, there's another little clue to tell you the story's true. They didn't want you to have the file, to go and look at, that Nixon ordered up a chopper around 8:30 or 9 and went to Homestead and sent the chopper to Jackie Gleason's house, where he went there in person with him and probably called him on the phone. Knew Jackie was home because he's hosting this golf tournament that day. And so we know from the records they were all there in place, and that Homestead was in place. And later it was destroyed by a terrible hurricane, and Nixon's house was bulldozed. It's gone. And the Inverary golf course is closed. And I don't know if Jackie's home is still there or not. But everyone's deceased. It was over 50 years ago now. And so it's tough to find anyone who knew the facts, or the son or daughter of someone. It was kind of a hush-hush affair. So we can piece together the circumstantial evidence, and I think it did happen.
What parts of the story, well, you mentioned, and that was the version I had heard, that he had come to Nixon's or to Gleason's door and that he evaded, the Secret Service and so forth. So you've disabused us of that notion. Where else do you think the story might break down?
There's been a claim that Nixon, or rather Jackie, told the whole story from his UFO house in 1986. Well, sorry, Jackie didn't own it. He sold it in 64. And there was a number of other claims by some UFO people that don't have very good reputations, to put it politely. And some of these embellishments don't make sense when you examine them. I do examine some in my book. I don't take up too much time because I want to get to the facts, not nonfiction fantasy that somebody made up. But in 2003, Beverly Gleason gave her final interview on the story and said for sure that Nixon did show Jackie these things, and that Jackie had recently heard from a U.S. astronaut from the space program. She said in its early days that extraterrestrials were quite real, and that the Nixon encounter cemented things for him, that this made it just proof positive in his mind. He had no doubts after that. He finally got the proof from the man himself, the commander-in-chief.